Welcome back to Hunting the Haunted here on the Paranormal Network, where we dissect and discuss alleged accounts of paranormal activity, hauntings, and ghost stories from around the globe. I'm your co-host, Jason Hewlett.
And I'm Peter Renn. On this episode, we're discussing a monster that's handing out free hugs of the deadly variety, Huggin Molly.
It's best to stay home when the sun sets in Abbeville, Alabama. If you want to avoid Huggin Molly's chilly embrace, that is. As the legend goes, beginning in the early 1900s, an oversized figure dressed all in black began roaming the streets at night, looking for unsuspecting victims. Once she fixates on someone, she hugs the person and screams loudly into their ears. Oof. Many people have recounted stories of being chased by what they believe was Huggin Molly. Local parents have even taken advantage of the story to keep their children in line. The town embraces its nighttime warden, proudly calling itself the home of Huggin Molly. Thank you all for watching Hunting the Haunted. And I ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now. Like this video and click on the bell, notified each time a new video goes up. Now back to the show. So, what do you think of this story so far, Peter?
Well, it beats the norm with alleged killers roaming the streets of ghosts and that kind of thing. It sounds like a jolly old folk story.
Kind of like what you'd have back home in England, right?
Yeah, pretty much, but we wouldn't get Huggin Molly. We'd probably get a kick in the teeth. That's about it.
Well, that is the British thing to do, so.
It is, yeah. It's common occurrence just to say hello to someone.
Well, many people reference a story told by Mac Gregory, an Abbeville native who claims to have encountered Huggin Molly when he was a teenager in the 1920s. Mac worked for a grocery store at the time and had just finished the final delivery as it was getting dark. He was walking home when he sensed someone behind him. He turned and made out a figure following in the shadows, very tall, very wide, all dressed in black. Mac walked faster, and the figure increased its pace to match. He slowed, and the figure slowed too. Knowing he was unlikely to be able to outrun Molly entirely, Mac hurried at a jog until he saw his front door, then sprinted to get inside, slamming the door behind him. When he looked back out again, Molly was gone. Mac refused to do another night delivery. That would scare the pants off of me, actually.
Yeah, it's definitely a more happy story in comparison to a lot of folklore stories that we've heard over the last few episodes of the show. In relation to the hugging as well, fine. It's I just kind of wonder where this, if it is an actual story, where this actually derived from. It sounds like a drunken conversation in a bar somewhere.
Well, it does, and I mean, stories like this usually start in some form of fact, right? Something inspires them, but I couldn't find anything where it actually said where it really began, other than Max was the first really recounted story based on what he had heard.
I guess it's some Molly somewhere that likes a good hugging.
Could be a whole other different type of video. We've got another such Huggin Molly encounter though, Pete. This one from the mother of another teenager who was out late. A sixth sense told the mother her boy might be in danger, and she was compelled to run out on the porch and look. There, in the dim light of the night, she saw him hurrying up the street toward her, a dark figure fast on his heels. She screamed at her son to run and held the door open until he rushed into the safety of the house. Although the child in each of these stories got away, Molly still achieved her goal. She scared them both inside. This is beginning to sound like a cautionary tale to children, doesn't it, Pete?
It does, but I'm just failing to read or hear how the hugging gets incorporated in this.
I guess, it's that whole once she catches you, she's got you and like screams in your ear, and I guess maybe it just wrecks your hearing kind of thing. It's like Ichabod Crane with the pumpkin. You know what I mean? When he got hit with the pumpkin and that was the end of him.
Like a newborn child crying in your ear. Some kind of deafness, I guess.
Do you have a history of these kind of stories in England, though, like the cautionary tales to children, like there was parents kind of made up to kind of keep kids in line or not stay out all night?
Well, we did. I think we brushed upon this before. We were talking about Dick Whittington, that folklore, that story we had down by the Surrey countryside. And a lot of it was kind of, urban myth per se, but it was around an actual person that was, in history as well. But in essence, a lot of the story, that particular story, was to keep us out of the countryside at night and keep us away from there for whatever reason. It's probably safer to go in the countryside back then than what it was to actually go into the city. So it's just that continual the story that's passed on from generation to generation. And I guess each time it's passed on, there's a slightly different edge to it. There might be some factual, instances behind this, but it's common law in a lot of old historic areas, not so much Canada, but areas such as the US and the UK and places like that have these kind of common stories. That's a part of their culture as well, right?
Well, even like the last episode with the Deer Island, the headless skeleton of Deer Island, right? That was very much a part of their culture.
Yep, pretty much.
Well, I did find out a little bit about Molly, if there is a Molly. Some say that she was never a ghost but a human with supernatural powers. The original Molly might have been a mother traumatized by the death of her only child, seeking comfort by forcing her love on other children, hence the hug. There are at least 3 situations in which Molly was definitely a living, breathing human. The first involves a disgruntled professor from the Southern Alabama Agricultural College. Students from out of town like to go out and visit friends at night, roaming the streets and getting into trouble. The professor hated that. He donned the Molly disguise to scare them back to their beds. It is quite possible he was even the original Molly, and the legend grew from there. Then, there were the copycats. In Baton Rouge, a man capitalized on his Molly costume to pursue pretty young women. What a creep. In Headland, a couple of towns over from Abbeville, a Huggin Molly impersonator caused such a stir that the editor of the local paper had to post a warning to the public, and I quote, "Some unprincipled person is parading the streets of Headland at all hours of the night, dressed as a woman in black. It is frightening the women and children and causing our large number of dogs to be kicking up a racket for most of the night. I have been requested to notify the person or thing that it will be shot on sight by a certain husband and father whose wife and children were frightened out of their wits the other night. Somebody is likely to get hurt if they don't learn to behave themselves." No word on whether the announcement had any effect. What do you think of all that, Peter?
Sounds spooky to me.
Definitely the mother, who lost her child angle kind of plays very much into folklore and urban legend, the ghost, the spirit of such a mother.
It definitely, with that kind of tale, I mean, obviously things like that does happen in real life, but it does kind of add a bit more bite to the story, that kind of thing. On the kind of, the paranormal investigator side of us all, we haven't seen any evidence of this Huggin Molly, and until we see that kind of evidence, then there will be further validation in it. But until then, it's just an urban legend, and which is kind of different to the norm.
It is, right? Well, there has been sort of a last Molly sighting, Peter, in 2010 during the annual Yada Abba Day, a celebration of the Abbeville heritage. A local teacher was leading a tour through the cemetery when a dark figure appeared between the headstones and stormed away, scaring the crap out of the crowd. It's unclear if this was just a publicity stunt. Molly's legend doesn't just survive through stories and sightings, though. One Abbeville resident has capitalized on the story and opened a restaurant called Huggin Molly's, where the menu features Molly's fingers and comeback sauce. I want to try a Molly finger, Peter. I'm sure it's like a chicken wing or something like that, and not as horrible as it sounds.
My brain went straight to the gut then when you said that.
Well, as soon as I said that, I was like, I shouldn't have even brought that up.
Yeah, I'd like to try a Molly finger as well. It's definitely, well, obviously people, there's businesses have been, there's some kind of financial endorsement in relation to this, but it sounds like, I don't know what to say, Jason, about it, to be honest with you.
It's a different one, isn't it? Which is why I wanted to highlight it. Like, it's so different than any of the other cases we've covered, where there's definitely been kind of a definite paranormal aspect to it. But that's what sort of appealed to me, is it's just a different story. And it's not as, I mean, sure, there's the whole chasing of children and screaming at them, but it's not as sinister as some. It's its own thing. I would love to go to Abbeville and see if we could find if there is a Huggin Molly roaming the streets.
Yeah, we could use some kind of trigger object, like just put a T-shirt on saying free hugs or something like that.
But we get a giant Boo Bear with a T-shirt saying free hugs and see what happens, right?
Yeah, that'd be good. No, it's a great story. I don't, obviously, like I said earlier, there doesn't seem to be much validation in it in regard to evidence, but it's definitely an urban legend that it might be worth investigating one day. We could perhaps put it on our to-do list.
So it's a growing to-do list, that's for sure.
For sure.
All right, that wraps up this edition of Hunting the Haunted. We'll be back next month with an all-new investigation. Until then, I'm Jason Hewlett.
And I'm Peter Renn. Stay spooky.